Hi, everybody. This is Jack Allwild with another money episode. We have a very special guest, Joseph Hadaway, with us today. He is at J Hadaway FC on Twitter. Go give him a follow. Entrepreneur, financial coach, writer, YouTuber, podcaster, does it all. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, man. I'm really looking forward to this.
So before we get into some of your many endeavors, we like to start out by asking, what was your relationship like with money growing up?
Yeah, so I guess as a kid, my mom liked to use the term stingy.
Okay.
I always preferred the term penny pinching. I say we definitely weren't the most well-off family, but also my parents, they managed what little money we had pretty well. Never missed a meal, and they really pushed that on to my siblings and I. So even at a young age, I was watching what I spent, watching what I earned, keeping a budget, keeping everything together.
Did they give you any like allowance or anything, or did you have a good sense of money, kind of, or how to use it, how to save it?
Not really. I mean, every now and then they throw a few bucks our way for like, I guess, super specific chores. But as a whole, no, we did not really get allowance much as kids. Which then usually came birthdays, Christmas, all we ever asked for was money.
Okay.
And I think that's a lot of where the budgeting sense comes out, because I'm a November birthday, and then a month later is Christmas. If I know I'm only getting paid twice a year, I got 10 months I got to make that last.
Well, yeah, well said. Okay, so you also have launched Strive to Fi. Now this is a podcast, and why don't you tell how you came upon that? What flared you up to want to start that?
Yeah. So I've been doing this content creation thing for right about 3 years now. Podcast came in year and a half, or actually next month makes 2 years ago. And it's been a little on again, off again, as anyone who looks at my episode history will see, but I'm not sure when this is going live, but September 4th, it's going on again, and I've got like 8 episodes pre-recorded. So we're going for the long term this time.
Cool.
But yeah, starting the podcast. So for a long time, probably my first year and a half really of doing anything online, any online content creation. I had my blog going, and I had my Twitter page, now X, I guess. And I had an Instagram that I had barely posted on, and it kind of dawned on me that I was not reaching people like at all. So my thought process was, well, then I need to expand to another platform. And I did not feel ready to do video content. And I say that, I should really rather say I started looking at what the other large talking heads in the industry and the financial coaching industry do. And what's Dave Ramsey known for? Among other things, one of the most popular podcast radio shows in the world.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of went, if it works for Dave, I'll give it a shot too. And I got into that, and it kind of just honestly kept happening. I didn't think it would, but people started liking it. People started coming on the show. Exact same to this, really. And I ended up really enjoying doing it.
Cool. So, I mean, how were you drawn to personal finance to begin with?
Yeah. Also a great question. So I like to say I stumbled into it by accident. I like to tell the story of when I entered college, I was a saxophone performance major.
Okay.
And I did not enjoy being a saxophone performance major, to say the least. So one day, after like a really bad day in class, I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. So I walked to the next building over, and I tried to talk to the advisor to switch my major. That was the College of Engineering. He went home that day. He went home early that day because his kid was sick. So then, because I was still in my I'm so done with this, get me somewhere else phase, I walked to the next building over, which happened to be the College of Business. Suddenly, 2 weeks later, I was in finance and business courses, and I also like to say I fell down the nerd hole. Wow. Went in pretty quickly, and I started learning about personal finance, and that really compounded on itself. Also in college, I spent some time working payday lending.
Okay.
And that's kind of when I realized that I was just starting to nerd out in all this stuff. Other people who, especially working with the payday lending, a lot of our customer base, couldn't even tell you what the word budget meant, much less investment, stock market, 401k. So that's kind of what got me leaning even more into it. So I felt the need to, if nothing else, educate myself on how to keep my money together and make it work for me.
Wow. So that's a real like sliding doors moment. The engineering advisor just wasn't there and you walked next door and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's probably been one of the happiest accidents of my life.
Wow. I've talked with a good number of people on this now, and this is a cool story. So, okay, so someone starting out, what would you recommend if someone, let's say they do have some student loan debt and they're kind of just wandering, what would you advise them?
Well, number one, you got to kind of take stock of what you have. As a penny pinching person, I mean, I can look at my bank account balance and pretty quickly come up where every single penny went. I keep notes of subscriptions and everything. And I'm coming from that personally. I'm always a little surprised to talk to someone who like, oh, I have a credit card bill. How much is it? Oh, I don't know. Okay. So my first step is always, you got to take stock of what you have. Pull pay stubs, get exactly how much money you have coming in every month. Then whatever it be, your rent payment, your mortgage payment, your student loan payment, your credit card, subscriptions like Spotify, Netflix, whatever. First things first, we got to know exactly how much is coming in and exactly how much is going out. You got to take that look at it first. And then number two, you got to live on a budget. Like, it's great to look at all that stuff now, but the most important thing by far is to get into good money habits and keep them going. Because if you're just making money and spending money and you're not tracking it, who knows where it's going? You got to get on top of it and control it.
Were there any research? I mean, it sounds like you might be a Dave Ramsey fan just by the fact you brought him up in the beginning, but what people have been instrumental in kind of motivating you and inspiring you, and what tools have you used along the way?
Yeah, so I was a huge Dave Ramsey fanatic there for a while. I've fallen out of that in recent years, kind of just because I do like a lot of his financial advice, and he has helped a lot of people. I don't agree 100% with the baby steps as he lays them out. I'm not as like debt averse as he is, but he was my first intro into personal finance.
Okay,
I've got the Total Money Makeover. Actually, I think right here by my desk. I've read it probably 4 or 5 times.
Okay, cool.
Along with the Everyday Millionaires, Chris Hogan. I got really into the Ramsey stuff, and then I started falling out of that, kind of just due to some of his more moral conundrums.
Okay.
And I do have a YouTube video about that. Shameless self-plug.
Okay.
And then around that time, I started hopping in the online community. Started finding Graham Stephan.
Okay, I love Graham
as a
Stephan.
YouTuber. Mark, I believe it's Tilbury.
Okay, I know him. Yeah.
2 absolutely great personal finance creators, as well as I'm going to start naming books here because I can't think of the author. Infinity Investing was one that I really enjoyed, which is a very unique take on wealth building.
Is this infinite banking, like through whole lives?
No, actually, which good question, because I do get that a lot. So the way infinity investing, what they teach you is you get a dividend paying stock. In the book, they use the suggestion Microsoft. Okay. And you save up to 100 shares of Microsoft, and you keep getting dividends on that. And then in turn, you use those dividends, as well as now that you have 100 shares, you're selling covered calls. Okay. You use that covered call and that dividend income to turn around and buy real estate. Okay. You investment real estate, and then you rent that out, take the money and invest it back into your dividend paying stock. So it's the infinite cycle of income. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I sell covered calls and do real estate, so I guess I'm doing it already.
Cool. It's a very unique take. The Wealthy Barber, I can't think of who that one's by. Do highly recommend that as well. And also, no, I've got it like right over here. I'm finishing up. I'm not sure if you follow him on Twitter. Walk You to Wealth, Kevin Feig. Okay. He recently released a book that I'm about 3/4 of the way through right now, and do highly recommend that as well. Cool. Also, just recommend Kevin. He's a cool guy.
What about for budgeting? You sound pretty organized. What budgeting apps or tools have you used?
So I'm an Excel purist.
Okay.
And I do get a lot of hate for that sometimes. I know the budgeting app exists. We keep bringing up Dave Ramsey. I know he's got the Every Dollar.
Yep.
You Need a Budget is another common one. Personally, I like Excel.
Cool.
I like tracking everything myself. I guess I should say I feel more connected to the inflows and outflows, if that makes sense, when I'm physically entering them myself.
Okay. And are you just tracking like your budgets each month, or are you also tracking net worth pretty religiously?
So I don't actually track net worth like at all at this point.
Okay.
I'm 25. I'm pretty early in
Gotcha.
my wealth building journey. Especially we just bought this, which is in the process of becoming our first rental property.
Okay, cool.
And with that mortgage coming up, my net worth is probably negative right now.
Okay.
We just bought less than a year ago. But that said, I do like see why people do track net worth, and I do feel like later on in my life, I will get to that point where the first of every month I will track my net worth. And honestly, just another step, because I can tell you, first every month I do update my investment balances and my debt balances. So now that I'm talking about it out loud, I'm like, why don't I do that? It's right there. But at this point, I do not, because getting, especially right now as a starting out real estate investor, getting that cash flow going is more important to me than the value of my assets.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So, okay, so besides real estate, like kind of how are you allocated? How are you allocating your money that's coming in?
Yeah. I mean, if we're going like accounts, of course, I got my 401k up to the employer match,
Cool.
a little bit my Roth IRA, a little bit my wife's Roth IRA, and the rest into a taxable brokerage.
Okay, cool.
And even if you want to get into technicals of investing outside of accounts, I mean, I'm investing money in my business every month.
Gotcha. Okay.
But if you want to talk,
and that's probably the best ROI.
Here's hoping.
Yeah.
So, some months it feels like it is. Some months I'm like, oh, why am I putting money down this pit?
Well, okay. Well, I did have one note when you said you didn't agree with all of Dave Ramsey's baby steps. I'm now curious, what would you change in Dave Ramsey's baby steps?
Yeah. So number one, I know he's a big proponent of the $1,000 emergency fund. I mean, prime example, we had to replace our HVAC about 2 months ago. That was $9,000 down the hole.
Wow.
If we were on Dave's baby steps, where we would be, because I mean, I still have a little bit of student loan debt myself. We have a little bit of consumer debt. I think just really student debt and a little balance left on a car loan. If we were following Dave's baby steps, we want to have that $1,000, and I don't know where the other $8,000 would come from. And that said, it was 96 degrees outside today.
Wow.
So I don't really like the $1,000 emergency fund. Personally, when I talk to people or I coach clients, I say minimum 2 months expenses before we start worrying about anything else in emergency fund.
Okay.
And then number two, I'm not as debt adverse as Dave Ramsey is. Take my student loan debt, for example, since that's kicking back in October of this year. I think I have like a 4% interest rate on that. And then combine that with my monthly payment's going to be like $35.
Okay.
I could pay that off right now, probably, if I wanted to. However, counter argument to that, the S&P 500 is up like 17% this year.
Yeah,
at that point,
sure.
We're getting into a math equation.
Yeah. So, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess, when did he actually make the baby steps? Because that $1,000 emergency fund probably needs to be adjusted for inflation.
I want to say sometime back in the 80s, 90s. I'm not sure of like an exact date. I want to say he exited, if I remember my Dave Ramsey trivia correctly, which somebody please down in the comments yell at me if I'm wrong. But if I'm wrong, like the video and subscribe. There we go. I want to say it was like mid to late 80s is when he came out of bankruptcy. And pretty soon after that is when we started the whole coaching process. So I would assume sometime in like the 88 to 93 range. But I could be making that up off the top of my head.
Okay, Joseph. So as we're closing out here, if someone were to ask you what's the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received, what would you say?
Okay, so best piece of advice, and this is going to sound so generic, and everyone says it, but it's the truth. Pay yourself first. Shout out the wealthy barber. That is like chapter 2. Treat investing like it's a bill. Better yet, I like auto buys. I like auto transfers. I get paid every 2 weeks, and that money comes out of my account before I even see it. It's another quote unquote bill that I have to pay. And that mentality helps you, I think my wording is, that mentality helps you keep investing rather than, like, I could say, I want to take a few more, vacations or a few more date nights a month. Well, then we could just slow down the investing. Don't think about it like that. It's a bill that has to be paid. If you say you're paying $50 a month toward that, you're putting in $50 a month, 100, 200, whatever it be. Just keep doing it.
Okay, cool advice. What about the worst piece of advice?
Worst piece of financial advice that I've ever heard. Oh, can I go a 2-prong answer with this?
Yes, you can.
I'll never forget it, and this was when I was working payday lending. I was kind of just in the beginning stages of learning personal finance, and a woman was in, and her DTI was like 0.8 or 80%. So I guess for anyone not familiar with the terms, her debt payments every month were like 80% of her income. Wow. And we were selling her a loan or a product that was going to take up the majority of the other 20%. And it's like, we're signing the paperwork, and I'm looking over. I'm like, are you not concerned about this? She looked at me in the face and said, oh, I don't worry about that. I'll just declare bankruptcy again.
Wow.
So that's the worst advice I've ever heard. Don't just take on debt, then declare bankruptcy. That
it's a bold strategy.
See if it plays off for him, Cotton.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of like the actual like worst advice I've ever heard, came from my friend's dad when I graduated college. He sat me down. He's like, "So, just graduated, you got a job. When you get a new car?" What do you mean? What do you mean when I'm gonna get a new car? Mine runs perfectly fine. So you just graduated, you got the job. You gotta treat yourself. You deserve it. And I think that would be the worst advice. Like, my car ran fine. I ain't anything new. He even talked about me getting a larger apartment. That apartment was fine. You don't deserve it. If you get yourself in the mindset of I did this, therefore I deserve, and yes, treat yourself along the way, but don't put yourself into like a financial prison because you deserve that vacation or deserve that new car, or deserve that house you can't afford. Yeah. You're only going to end up regretting it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that lifestyle creep sometimes hard to avoid, but yeah, you gotta get that under control for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Joseph Hadaway, why don't you tell the listeners where they can go learn more about you or hear what you're producing or get in touch with you?
Yeah, best way to reach out to me, josephhadawayfc.com. That's got my links to my coaching program, my free budgeting templates, and all of my social media profiles on there. Or if you just want to find me on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it now, at jhadawayfc. Same on Instagram, and then I'm Joseph Hadaway on YouTube and TikTok.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.